This story is meant to inform and inspire, not to provide medical advice. She paused at the kitchen window, a sliver of sunlight catching the steam rising from her morning cup of tea. For a moment, Mary just watched herself in the glass reflection, squinting at the faint lines that told stories of decades gone by. "Am I really this tired every morning?" she whispered to no one in particular, her voice barely audible over the soft hum of the refrigerator. The question felt both familiar and unsettling, yet she carried it lightly, like the gentle weight of a favorite sweater. Mary had never considered herself someone who fussed over health trends. She liked her routines simple: a slow breakfast, a walk around the block, a moment with her cat before the day truly began. But lately, she noticed little things: the fleeting twinges in her knees, the occasional fatigue that coffee didn't seem to lift, the way her thoughts wandered more than they used to. She chalked it up to age, yes, but also wondered if there were small adjustments she had overlooked. Her mornings often began with a quiet ritual. She sliced a crisp apple, the fragrance sharp and sweet, and set a few cloves of garlic aside, not for cooking, but to admire their smooth, papery skins and the subtle promise of flavor they held. Something about preparing them calmed her, a tactile reminder that the day was hers to shape, even in small ways. She remembered the first time she noticed the difference such tiny rituals could make an early morning, years ago, when she added a single extra walk around the block, and suddenly, her mind felt lighter, sharper. Mary leaned against the counter, recalling that day. It wasn't a revelation, not in a dramatic, life-changing sense, but a quiet shift. The little steps that, over time, nudged her energy upward and her spirits along. She smiled at the memory and murmured, "It's funny how small things can feel so big when you notice them." In saptifies, as in styles ovations fine as. According to many studies, energy levels, in older adults, can dip due to a combination of factors like digestion, mild inflammation, and slight changes in metabolism. Imagine the body as an old kitchen appliance. The motor is still strong, but some of the blades may need gentle cleaning, the gears a touch of oil. It's not broken, just in need of mindful attention. For Mary, that meant noticing the effects of what she ate and how she moved, without feeling pressured or anxious, simply paying attention. She sliced her apple, the knife tapping against the cutting board like a metronome, and set the pieces beside the garlic cloves. While the ingredients seemed ordinary, they reminded her of rhythm and harmony, the way flavors combined, how each small choice could shift a morning from dull to vibrant. Garlic, she reflected, was more than pungent spice. It was a ritual of aroma and anticipation. Apples, crisp and bright, brought a sweetness that felt like a tiny celebration each time she bit into one. Together, they became a gentle metaphor for balance, strong and sharp, yet refreshing and familiar. As Mary moved through her kitchen, she thought about small, practical ways to support her energy and wellness, things anyone could try. She took 3 deep breaths before sitting to enjoy her tea, a simple act of mindfulness that slowed her racing thoughts. Then she made a point to drink a full glass of water with her breakfast, imagining it lubricating every corner of her body, helping digestion and circulation. Later, she'd take a short walk around the neighborhood, just 15 minutes, letting the sunlight warm her shoulders and the fresh air fill her lungs. None of these steps were revolutionary. None required special equipment or expensive supplements, just awareness and gentle commitment. Mary paused mid-step, glancing at her reflection again, and noticed a quiet shift in herself. She felt a touch more alert, a little lighter, as if her small morning rituals had already begun to matter. She remembered the wisdom her grandmother often shared: little things build the strongest habits, and the strongest habits build a life you can count on. It was simple, but it carried weight, the kind of weight that doesn't press down, but lifts softly from within. Finishing her breakfast, Mary placed the apple and garlic back in the basket, their aromas mingling with the faint scent of brewed tea. She leaned back, letting the warmth settle into her shoulders, and reflected on the subtle, persistent power of small choices. It wasn't about perfection, or quick fixes, or dramatic changes. It was about noticing, adjusting, and honoring the rhythms of her own body. If she wanted, she could explore more ideas and continue learning, one chapter at a time, one quiet morning after another. And in that gentle promise lay a sense of hope, a reminder that even small shifts could ripple outward, touching energy, mood, and clarity in ways that mattered. Have you ever noticed how small changes sometimes shift everything? The garden bench creaked under Jane's weight as she settled in, the morning sunlight spilling over the flower beds like a painter's careless brush. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and watched the wind ripple through the marigolds. I wonder if anyone else feels this invisible tug of time, she muttered softly, almost to herself. A faint sigh escaped her lips, carrying a mix of curiosity and gentle resignation. Jane had always loved her garden. It wasn't just the roses or the neat rows of herbs. It was the quiet rhythm of tending something alive, the satisfaction of seeing tiny green shoots push through soil she had touched and nourished. Recently, though, she noticed subtle shifts. Her back ached more easily. Her energy seemed to drain faster than it once did, and even bending to plant a new seed felt like a small negotiation with her body. She wondered whether it was age or simply the consequences of ignoring the whispers her body had been sending for years. As she inhaled the scent of damp earth, Jane's mind wandered to a neighbor she had met on one of her walks, a retired engineer named Tom. He had casually mentioned, "It's funny how small habits build up without us even noticing, sometimes for decades." That idea resonated. Jane realized she had been making tiny adjustments all along, sipping more water, stretching in the morning, savoring her herbal teas, but without a conscious plan. The benefits felt fragmented. According to many studies, physical energy and muscle strength in older adults can fluctuate due to mild inflammation, reduced circulation, and natural changes in joint function. Picture your body like a garden hose. Sometimes water flows freely, sometimes kinks slow it down. Gentle attention, watering here, removing a small obstruction there, can help keep everything running smoothly. It wasn't about drastic interventions, but about consistent, small adjustments. Jane reached for her small trowel, running her fingers over its worn wooden handle. She thought about how gardening mirrored self-care. Each seed planted, each weed gently removed, was a tiny, deliberate act, one that compounded over time. She recalled a morning last month when she had spent just 5 extra minutes stretching before starting her planting. Her knees, which often complained after bending, felt looser, more forgiving. That small investment of time, unnoticed at the moment, had already begun to pay off. She glanced at the rows of basil and thyme, imagining how each leaf represented a small choice that mattered. Hydration, short walks, mindful breathing, these were the fertilizer, sunlight, and water of her own body. She decided to experiment with a few more tiny rituals. First, a morning walk around the block, paying attention to posture and breathing, letting her lungs expand fully with each step. Second, a brief pause mid-morning for mindful sipping of water, imagining it nurturing her joints and muscles. Third, a small habit of incorporating seasonal herbs into her meals, appreciating both taste and potential health benefits. As Jane bent to prune a stubborn sprig of rosemary, she noticed how even these simple gestures grounded her in the present. She wasn't chasing dramatic change, just paying attention to the little ways she could nurture her body's natural rhythms. And as she worked, a quiet joy settled over her, a sense that she could, in her own modest ways, influence how she felt each day. "Life is really just a collection of tiny moments," she whispered, wiping dirt from her palms. "And those moments are the ones that quietly shape who we become." Her reflection wasn't just about energy or strength. It was about connection to herself, to the world, and to the gentle passage of time. She realized she didn't need grand gestures or miracle routines. She only needed consistency, curiosity, and a willingness to notice. By the time Jane rose from the bench, the morning had deepened into a warm glow. Her knees felt a little lighter, her mind a touch sharper, and her spirit quietly uplifted. The garden had reminded her of a truth she often overlooked. The smallest, most deliberate actions, whether watering a plant, taking a few extra breaths, or adding a pinch of flavor to a meal, could ripple outward, influencing energy, mood, and resilience in subtle but meaningful ways. She left the garden with a smile, thinking about the week ahead. She could experiment with herbs in her tea, take a longer stroll in the park, and perhaps even teach a neighbor a simple stretch she had learned. Each act would feel ordinary, but collectively, they formed a kind of promise to herself. A promise of attention, care, and curiosity. Have you ever noticed how small adjustments, done consistently, can quietly transform the way you feel each day? The sound of metal against ceramic echoed softly in the quiet kitchen. a small, familiar rhythm that made Sarah pause mid-stir. "Do I even notice these little things anymore?" she muttered, smiling at herself as the spoon clinked against her oatmeal bowl. It was absurd. Really, something as ordinary as breakfast could feel like a revelation if she paid attention. But in that brief moment, the clink reminded her of mornings long ago, when she had felt lighter, more present, and somehow more connected to her own body. Sarah had always enjoyed breakfast. Not for the meal itself, though oatmeal was comforting, nor for the caffeine in her morning tea, but for the ritual, the small acts that marked the start of a new day. Lately, she noticed that even these simple routines carried weight. Her hands ached slightly from gripping the spoon, her wrist ached more than it used to, and yet, there was something grounding in the repetition. She watched the swirl of cinnamon and apple pieces mixing into the oats, letting her mind wander over the patterns in her own energy and attention. There was a time when she didn't notice these little aches. Life moved fast, and she moved with it, juggling meetings, errands, and social obligations. Now, the quiet moments of preparation offered insight she hadn't expected, small clues about how to support her body, one deliberate gesture at a time. Sarah reflected on the mornings she added a tiny twist to her routine, stirring in a bit of fresh garlic with her apples, sprinkling cinnamon on top, or simply breathing more slowly as she mixed. Each step was minor, almost imperceptible, yet it grounded her, connecting her to both flavor and body. According to many studies, as people age, subtle changes in digestion, wrist and hand strength, and overall energy can occur. Think of your body like a well-used kitchen mixer. The motor still works, but the beaters need care, lubrication, and gentle attention to keep running smoothly. Small, deliberate habits like adjusting grip, slowing movements, or paying attention to sensations can help maintain comfort and efficiency without demanding drastic change. As she took a bite of her oatmeal, Sarah noticed the interplay of textures, the soft apple, the crunch of cinnamon, and the earthy aroma of oats. It reminded her of her father, who used to say that paying attention to the senses was a form of mindfulness. It was a small lesson she had tucked away, and now it found new meaning. She decided to experiment with a few easy adjustments. First, holding the spoon lightly, noticing how her wrist moved without strain. Second, taking slower bites, allowing the body and mind to fully register the flavors. And third, using each meal as a micro-moment to check in with herself, feeling for tension, warmth, and ease. Sarah chuckled quietly at the thought that a simple clinking spoon could teach her so much. The rhythm reminded her to slow down, to honor small movements, and to embrace the subtle ways in which energy flowed or sometimes didn't through her body. By noticing these tiny patterns, she could anticipate minor discomforts and address them gently, whether through stretching, hydration, or brief pauses between tasks. She thought about the subtle empowerment in these small choices, adjusting her grip, savoring the flavors, paying attention to how she felt. All of these were tiny acts of agency, a quiet reclaiming of control over the rhythms of her day. The metaphor of the kitchen mixer lingered in her mind. When maintained with care and attention, it continued to function efficiently, delivering the results it was meant to. The same could be said for her own body. Small, thoughtful rituals preserved comfort, strength, and energy. Finishing her breakfast, Sarah set down the spoon and stretched her fingers, marveling at how even minor adjustments could bring unexpected relief. She thought about carrying this mindfulness into the rest of her day, into her walk around the neighborhood, her morning emails, or even just folding laundry. It was the awareness of small patterns, repeated consistently, that created a sense of stability, ease, and quiet satisfaction. "Life often whispers through ordinary things," she said softly, almost to the empty kitchen, "and if you listen carefully, you'll hear exactly what it needs." That simple acknowledgement, the clink of a spoon, the swirl of cinnamon, the awareness of her own hands, felt like a small but meaningful victory. It reminded her that she didn't need to chase dramatic health breakthroughs. She only needed to notice, adjust, and nurture what she already had. Have you ever noticed how ordinary sounds and small gestures can teach you more about your body than you realized? The afternoon sun poured across the porch, casting long, golden stripes over the wooden floorboards. Tom leaned back in his chair, feeling the warmth seep into his shoulders, a quiet contrast to the stiffness that sometimes crept up after sitting too long. "It's funny how the light makes everything seem lighter," he murmured, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. The sound of distant children playing in the neighborhood carried on the breeze, mingling with the gentle rustle of maple leaves. Tom had always cherished these afternoons. Retirement had slowed the pace of life, but it hadn't slowed the constant awareness of his body. Lately, he noticed how easily fatigue arrived after even short bursts of activity, how his knees occasionally complained when he rose from the porch chair, or how his energy dipped unpredictably by mid-afternoon. Instead of frustration, he had begun to approach these moments with curiosity, asking himself what small habits could help him feel more stable, more comfortable, more like himself. He watched a neighbor's dog chase a ball across the yard and thought about his own stamina. Even minor movements, like bending to tend to a flower pot or lifting a lightweight grocery bag, now required a subtle negotiation with his body. It reminded him of a principle he had once read: small, deliberate actions, repeated consistently, often mattered more than sporadic bursts of effort. That afternoon, sunlight streaming through the porch railing, he felt a quiet determination to experiment with a few simple, accessible adjustments. According to many studies, joint comfort and muscle function in older adults can be supported through gentle movement, stretching, and moderate sun exposure. Think of the body as a bridge. The support beams remain strong, but the cables benefit from regular inspection and subtle adjustments. Tiny, consistent actions like light stretches, short walks, or mindful sun exposure help maintain resilience and flexibility without the need for drastic interventions. Tom leaned forward and picked up a small notebook he kept on the porch, the pages worn from years of use. He jotted a quick note about his knees and his energy levels, imagining this simple record as a way to notice patterns he might otherwise overlook. Then, he leaned back again, letting the sun warm his face, and allowed his mind to wander to practical steps he could take immediately. A 5-minute stretch, a short stroll down the driveway, and a deliberate set of shoulder rotations became his afternoon ritual, almost a dance with his own body. As he moved through the stretches, Tom marveled at the subtle impact of these small adjustments. The stiffness in his shoulders loosened, his back felt less rigid, and his mood lifted alongside the golden light. He realized that these tiny moments of attention were not about performance or achievement, they were about honoring the rhythms of his own body, recognizing when it needed care, and responding with kindness. After finishing his stretches, he settled back into his chair with a glass of water, feeling the warmth of the sun settle into him like a gentle embrace. He reflected on how easy it had been to overlook these small routines in the past, to assume that aches and fatigue were simply unavoidable. Now, each minor adjustment felt like a conversation with his body, a reminder that even small gestures could ripple outward to influence comfort, energy, and overall well-being. Tom's gaze drifted to the children playing across the street, their laughter carrying an infectious lightness. He thought about how vitality wasn't about grand feats, but about the accumulation of consistent, gentle habits that made movement easier, joints happier, and afternoons brighter. He allowed himself a moment of gratitude for the warmth of sunlight, the quiet porch, and the small steps he had already taken toward feeling more at ease in his own body. "Sometimes the simplest things matter the most," he said softly, sipping his water. "A stretch, a walk, a bit of sun. They're all tiny pieces that shape the day, the week, even the year." In that quiet moment, Tom felt a sense of empowerment. He could influence his comfort and energy not through drastic measures, but through awareness, patience, and the gentle consistency of small, deliberate choices. Have you ever noticed how just a few minutes in sunlight, with gentle movement, can shift your energy and mood for the rest of the day? Emma's fingers brushed against the leather cover of an old notebook tucked between a stack of magazines. She paused, squinting at the faded title written in looping cursive, "Health Notes." "How long has this been here?" she murmured, lifting it carefully as if it were fragile glass. Dust motes danced in the afternoon light, settling like tiny memories on the kitchen table. Flipping it open, she was immediately transported to the days when every entry was a hopeful experiment, tracking morning walks, noting favorite recipes, jotting reminders to drink more water. She had almost forgotten the notebook existed, yet the pages carried more than ink. They held stories of small shifts, tiny actions that had quietly shaped her well-being over the years. Emma recalled the morning she had started recording her energy levels before and after walks. At first, it had seemed unnecessary, a ritual too simple to matter. But over time, patterns emerged. She noticed how hydration, early stretching, or a small snack before walking subtly influenced her stamina. The notebook became a mirror, reflecting not just her habits, but her awareness, her curiosity, and her willingness to listen to her own body. Funny how you can overlook things that actually matter, she whispered to herself. Her back twinged slightly as she settled onto the chair, and she ran a hand over her notebook, marveling at the gentle reminder it offered. That small, consistent attention can yield meaningful insights. According to many studies, circulation, energy levels, and minor aches in older adults can be influenced by seemingly small habits. Picture your body like a garden irrigation system. The pipes are still intact, but careful monitoring, small adjustments, and consistent care ensure the water flows evenly. Tracking patterns, noticing subtle changes, and responding gently can maintain comfort and vitality over time. It wasn't about drastic interventions or instant fixes. It was about observation and thoughtful adjustment. Emma flipped to a page marked with a star, a note from last spring about her morning stretches. She had described the relief she felt when she spent 5 minutes bending gently, reaching for the ceiling, then folding forward slowly. Back then, it had seemed inconsequential, yet now she realized that those small stretches were supporting her joints and posture in ways she hadn't fully appreciated. Inspired, she decided to revisit a few small rituals from her notebook. First, a 5-minute stretching sequence each morning before breakfast. Second, mindful sips of water between tasks to stay hydrated. Third, a brief outdoor walk mid-morning, paying attention to posture and pace. Each step was simple, doable, and yet carried the potential to influence how her entire day unfolded. She set the notebook aside and stretched her arms toward the ceiling, imagining each vertebra moving like cogs in a carefully oiled machine. The slight tension in her back eased as she inhaled deeply, allowing herself to notice how her body responded to these gentle movements. It wasn't dramatic, but it was noticeable, a quiet reassurance that small care could ripple outward, shaping comfort, energy, and mood. As she walked to the window and gazed outside, Emma reflected on the broader lesson the notebook offered. Life often seemed overwhelming when viewed as a whole, but when broken into small, consistent actions, it became manageable, even joyful. Hydration, stretching, mindful attention, brief walks, these weren't flashy remedies, but steady, meaningful acts that supported her body and her spirit. The notebook reminded her that she didn't need extraordinary solutions. She needed awareness, patience, and the willingness to act consistently, even in the smallest ways. Emma returned to her chair and jotted a new note in the margin. 5 minutes this morning. Stretch, sip, walk, notice. It was simple, almost trivial, yet she felt a sense of accomplishment and hope. Each entry, each tiny habit, was a step toward maintaining her vitality, not through dramatic change, but through mindful, gentle care. She realized that the accumulation of these small choices formed the foundation of well-being, a quiet promise to herself, renewed every day. Sometimes, the past quietly teaches the present, she said aloud, tapping the notebook gently. It wasn't just about remembering. It was about acting on the lessons that had already revealed themselves, no matter how subtle. The notebook had been forgotten, but its wisdom was timeless. Small actions, noticed and repeated, quietly shaped comfort, energy, and resilience. Have you ever discovered a small record of your own habits and realized how tiny changes made a lasting difference? The aroma hit Lillian before she even opened the kitchen door. Garlic and apples simmering together on the stovetop sent a soft, teasing whisper through the air. She paused, inhaling deeply, and smiled. "It's funny how smells can remind you of so many little things," she murmured, letting the warmth of the scent wrap around her like an invisible hug. There was something comforting about mornings like this, the way the ordinary could suddenly feel magical, and the everyday act of preparing food became a gentle meditation. Lillian had always loved cooking, not for perfection or presentation, but for the way it grounded her in the moment. Recently, though, she had noticed that her energy dipped more easily, that even small tasks sometimes left her slightly breathless. Yet the kitchen, with its familiar tools and aromatic companions, offered a space to slow down and tune in. Today, as the apple and garlic hissed softly in the pan, she found herself observing not only the ingredients, but also how she felt the slight tingle of warmth in her chest, the calm settling in her shoulders, and the quiet curiosity that had always accompanied her morning rituals. She recalled the first time she tried mixing garlic with apple in a simple sauté. It had been an experiment born of curiosity, an attempt to blend flavors she loved while noticing how different ingredients affected her digestion and energy. That morning, she felt lighter and more alert than usual, not because of anything dramatic, but because she had taken the time to pay attention, to move slowly, and to create something that nourished her senses as much as her body. According to many studies, certain foods can support digestion and mild antioxidant activity in older adults. Imagine your digestive system as a gently running stream. Small additions, like the right balance of flavors, can help keep it flowing smoothly. The goal isn't dramatic change but thoughtful, small acts that encourage comfort, vitality, and awareness. Garlic, crisp apples, and other simple ingredients offer sensory pleasure and may gently support digestive comfort when included as part of mindful, balanced meals. Lillian stirred the pan carefully, noticing how the textures transformed, the garlic softening, the apples caramelizing slightly, and the fragrance deepening with every turn of the spoon. It wasn't just cooking, it was a form of reflection, a small act of kindness toward herself. She decided to pair her culinary mindfulness with a few tiny rituals that had proven helpful over time. First, savoring each bite slowly, noticing flavor and texture. Second, taking a few deep breaths while cooking, allowing her body to relax. Third, drinking a small glass of water alongside her meal to support digestion. Each action was minor on its own, but together they created a subtle, cumulative sense of well-being. As the scent filled the kitchen, Lillian paused again, leaning against the counter. She thought about how these small habits, repeated consistently, could influence energy, digestion, and overall comfort. The kitchen, with its quiet hum and familiar aromas, became a space of empowerment rather than obligation. She wasn't trying to fix herself overnight. She was honoring the rhythms of her body, noticing what felt good, and gently supporting herself in ways that made life more enjoyable. She plated her sautéed apples and garlic, appreciating the colors, textures, and warmth of the dish. Sitting at the table, she took her first bite slowly, letting each flavor register fully. It reminded her that small pleasures, carefully observed and appreciated, were often more meaningful than grand gestures. Cooking wasn't just about food, it was about presence, awareness, and the quiet power of small, deliberate choices. Even something as ordinary as a meal can remind you that care matters, Lillian whispered, sipping her tea afterward. The gentle aroma lingered, a reminder of the connection between body, senses, and small acts of attention. She felt a sense of satisfaction, not from achievement, but from noticing, from slowing down, and from embracing the simple rituals that supported her comfort and energy each day. Have you ever noticed how a simple smell or flavor can quietly shift the way you feel and connect you to your body? A familiar melody drifted through the living room, soft and tentative, like a memory tiptoeing back from years ago. Harold paused mid-step, letting the notes wrap around him. "Did I ever really notice how music touches everything?" he whispered, almost to himself. The vinyl record spun slowly on the turntable, a soft hum beneath the piano chords, filling the quiet space with warmth. It was ordinary, yet somehow extraordinary the way a song could awaken both body and mind, inviting awareness and reflection in the gentlest way. Harold had always loved music, but lately, he had started paying attention to more than just the tunes. He noticed how his shoulders relaxed when a favorite piece played, how his steps felt lighter during a brief dance in the kitchen, and how even his breathing seemed to sync with the rhythm. These small responses reminded him of the connection between body, mind, and simple joys, tiny signals he had overlooked for decades while rushing through life. He recalled an afternoon a few weeks ago when he had sat in the same chair, listening to a different record. The music seemed to untangle a knot of tension in his shoulders and back. It wasn't miraculous, but the small shift left him feeling calmer and more present than he had in weeks. That experience stayed with him, a subtle but consistent reminder that gentle attention and small habits could nurture both energy and comfort. According to many studies, Music and rhythmic activity can support mood, cognitive focus, and even subtle physical responses like posture and movement in older adults. Imagine your body as a finely tuned instrument. When you listen carefully, adjust the strings, and allow vibrations to resonate, everything works in harmony. Simple, consistent acts like listening, moving gently, or humming along can ripple outward, supporting both mental clarity and physical ease. Harold rose slowly and began a few small stretches in time with the melody. He rotated his shoulders, lifted his arms in gentle arcs, and swayed lightly from one foot to the other. Nothing strenuous, nothing dramatic, just a quiet, intentional dance that honored the way his body responded to the music. He paired these movements with mindful breaths, imagining the rhythm loosening stiffness and encouraging energy to flow more freely. It was a minor ritual, yet each motion carried awareness, care, and subtle empowerment. As he continued, Harold felt a familiar sense of satisfaction. The combination of music, movement, and mindfulness didn't erase the occasional aches or fatigue, but it offered something equally valuable, a sense of agency and presence. He realized that these small, consistent actions, dancing a few minutes, stretching to familiar songs, or simply noticing sensations, could shape the quality of his day far more than he had ever anticipated. Pausing by the window, he let the afternoon sun spill across the floorboards, feeling warmth seep into his shoulders and back. The music continued, an unobtrusive companion, reminding him that energy and comfort were not about perfection or achievement, but about noticing, adjusting, and celebrating the small moments that supported well-being. Even a few minutes of deliberate attention could ripple outward, leaving him steadier, calmer, and more attuned to his own rhythms. Harold leaned back into his chair, closing his eyes briefly, and letting the melody linger. "It's amazing how tiny things can matter so much," he said softly. The music, the gentle stretches, the mindful breaths, they weren't cures or guarantees, but they were ways to honor the body, nurture energy, and connect with life's subtle joys. In that quiet moment, he felt a sense of empowerment and hope. Small, deliberate choices could shape comfort, vitality, and presence, one note at a time. Have you ever noticed how a song, even a brief one, can subtly change your mood, movement, or awareness for the rest of the day? The old porch swing creaked softly as Margaret settled into it, the afternoon breeze brushing her cheeks with a gentle warmth. "I wonder if anyone else notices how a swing can make time feel slower," she whispered, letting her gaze drift across the quiet street. She rocked back and forth, feeling the familiar rhythm cradle her body in a comforting pattern. It wasn't just nostalgia, it was a moment of grounding, a chance to observe her own energy, posture, and the subtle ways her body responded to gentle motion. Margaret had always found solace in small movements. The swing wasn't just furniture, it was a companion, reminding her that even tiny actions could create calm and ease. Lately, she had become more aware of how stiffness crept into her shoulders and lower back, how her energy dipped after a day of errands or sitting too long. Yet the swing offered a subtle intervention, a chance to stretch, sway, and notice without effort or strain. It reminded her that the simplest gestures often held the most quiet power. She recalled a recent morning when she had spent 15 minutes on the swing before breakfast, allowing her shoulders to relax and her breathing to deepen. By the time she walked back inside, she felt lighter, more centered, and surprisingly alert. That small ritual had no dramatic fanfare, but it was consistent and deliberate, tiny moments that nurtured comfort and presence. Margaret realized that these small acts were like invisible threads, weaving stability, calm, and energy into the fabric of her day. According to many studies, gentle rhythmic movement, like swaying or rocking, can support joint comfort, posture, and circulation in older adults. Think of the body as a suspension bridge. The cables and beams remain strong, but gentle, swaying, and alignment help maintain balance and flexibility over time. Tiny, repeated gestures, rocking, stretching, or mindful posture adjustments don't promise overnight change, but they encourage comfort, energy, and resilience in subtle, cumulative ways. Margaret shifted slightly, letting the swing tilt forward, then backward, noticing how the motion stretched her lower back and loosened her shoulders. She paired this gentle rhythm with a few mindful breaths, imagining each inhale bringing warmth and energy into her joints, and each exhale releasing tension. She added a few micro-adjustments to her daily routine. A short period on the swing every morning, a few minutes of shoulder circles while standing, and deliberate stretches before climbing stairs. Each of these tiny actions wasn't a solution in isolation, they were building blocks for comfort and vitality over time. As she continued to rock gently, Margaret felt a sense of empowerment settle over her. She wasn't chasing dramatic improvement or instant results. Instead, she was honoring her body's needs, observing how subtle movement influenced her energy, and embracing small, consistent habits that mattered. The swing became more than furniture, it was a teacher, a reminder that attention and care could ripple outward, shaping both physical ease and emotional calm. She looked at the flowers lining the porch railing, their petals catching the sunlight, and marveled at the quiet parallels between tending plants and tending her own body. Both required patience, observation, and small, deliberate actions repeated consistently. By noticing the tiniest details, how a joint felt, how the breath flowed, how the swing supported movement, she could influence her overall comfort and vitality without stress or pressure. Margaret leaned back fully, letting the rhythm of the swing fill her senses. Life often whispers through the smallest gestures, she said softly, closing her eyes for a moment. The gentle sway, the sunlight, the warm breeze, they were ordinary, yet extraordinary in how they connected her to presence, comfort, and hope. It reminded her that small, intentional habits, repeated with curiosity and care, could quietly transform daily life. Have you ever noticed how a simple rhythm, like the sway of a swing, can subtly restore calm and energy in your body? Claire set down her teacup on the saucer, noticing the faint swirl of steam rising from the warm liquid. The cup was only half full, but she didn't mind. Maybe it's not about having everything, but about noticing what's here, she whispered, letting the quiet morning unfold around her. Sunlight spilled through the window, catching the edges of the saucer and turning the steam into fleeting ribbons of light. She felt the calm settling in her shoulders, a gentle reminder that small rituals could carry unexpected meaning. For Claire, mornings were a delicate balance of reflection and preparation. She had begun to notice how subtle fatigue crept in after simple tasks, folding laundry, bending to water plants, or walking short distances. Yet in the stillness of her kitchen, with the warmth of the teacup in her hands, she realized that slowing down and observing her own sensations could be surprisingly restorative. The half-full cup became a small metaphor. Even partial effort, observed mindfully, could provide comfort, energy, and satisfaction. She remembered a morning not long ago when she had taken just 5 minutes to sit with a cup of tea, noticing aroma, warmth, and taste. The ritual hadn't changed her health overnight, but it had grounded her, aligning body and mind in a subtle, meaningful way. That small pause became a template for mindfulness in other areas, stretching before leaving the house, taking brief walks around the block, or adjusting posture while standing at the counter. Each act was minor on its own, yet together they quietly shaped her day. According to many studies, mindful rituals like pausing with a warm beverage can support digestion, relaxation, and overall sense of well-being in older adults. Think of your body as a gently simmering pot. Small, intentional pauses allow heat and energy to circulate evenly, preventing strain and promoting balance. Tiny, repeated gestures, sipping mindfully, observing posture, stretching lightly create cumulative benefits, supporting comfort and vitality without dramatic interventions. Claire lifted the cup to her lips, savoring the taste and noticing the gentle warmth spreading through her hands. She decided to extend this mindful approach throughout her morning. First, taking a slow, deliberate sip and appreciating the flavors. Second, standing for a few moments after finishing the tea to stretch arms and shoulders. Third, walking slowly around the kitchen and foyer, observing how her knees and hips felt with each step. None of these steps required much time or effort, but each nurtured her body and awareness in a subtle, powerful way. As she completed her mini routine, Claire felt a quiet sense of empowerment. She wasn't trying to fix her body, chase instant results, or eliminate every ache. She was simply noticing, adjusting, and honoring her rhythms, one small choice at a time. The half-full teacup became a symbol of sufficiency. Even partial attention, repeated consistently, could ripple outward into comfort, energy, and calm. Looking out the window, Claire noticed a bird hopping along the fence, pecking delicately at crumbs. She smiled at the simplicity and persistence of life outside, reflecting on how her own small, deliberate actions mirrored the patience and care she observed in nature. Mindful sips, brief stretches, short walks, these weren't dramatic interventions, but tiny threads, weaving stability and vitality into her day. Sometimes, noticing is the most powerful act of all, she whispered, finishing her tea and setting the cup down carefully. The steam had dissipated, but the warmth lingered, a gentle reminder that small, consistent attention could quietly transform comfort, mood, and energy. With that thought, she stepped toward the door, ready to carry mindful awareness into the next moments of her day. Have you ever paused with something small, like a warm drink, and realized that the tiniest rituals can shape how you feel for hours afterward? The garden gate squeaked softly as Daniel pushed it open, the sound almost musical against the quiet morning. I never realized how much a small noise could mark the start of something, he murmured, stepping onto the sunlit path. The flowers were in full bloom, their colors vivid under the gentle sunlight, and the earthy scent of soil filled the air. The gate, once annoying in its creaks, now felt like a threshold, an invitation to notice, to move, and to simply be present in his own body. Daniel had always loved tending his garden, but recently he'd begun to notice how minor stiffness lingered in his hips and knees after even brief tasks. Pulling weeds or lifting watering cans left him aware of muscles he hadn't paid much attention to in years. Yet each morning, the garden offered a chance to engage gently, to move deliberately, and to notice the ways his body responded to simple actions. The creak of the gate became a subtle signal, prompting awareness before he bent to plant or crouched to prune. He remembered a week ago, kneeling on the soft soil to plant new seedlings. By slowing down, breathing deeply, and stretching intermittently, he realized he felt less strain than when he had rushed through the same tasks before. The garden didn't just nurture plants, it nurtured him. It reminded him that small, deliberate movements, when paired with attention and mindfulness, could ripple outward to influence comfort, energy, and mood in subtle, meaningful ways. According to many studies, gentle physical activity, like gardening or stretching during chores, can help maintain flexibility, circulation, and joint comfort in older adults. Imagine your body as a carefully tended garden. Even minor adjustments, bending, reaching, walking, slowly ensure everything grows harmoniously. Small, repeated actions may not produce instant results, but they encourage resilience, comfort, and vitality over time. Daniel paused at the gate and adjusted his posture, inhaling the earthy aroma of soil and flowers. He took a few deep breaths, letting awareness settle into his shoulders and hips. Then, he began a short sequence of movements, a gentle bend to the left, a stretch for his shoulders, and slow rotations of his wrists, before gripping his gardening tools. Each movement was deliberate, almost ceremonial, reinforcing a sense of control and attentiveness. He didn't rush, and he didn't push beyond comfort. Instead, he let the rhythm of his body guide each action. As he worked, pulling weeds and planting new seedlings, Daniel noticed the subtle benefits. His back felt less rigid, his shoulders lighter, and his mind calmer. These small adjustments didn't eliminate the natural fatigue of the day, but they offered a sense of agency and well-being. He reflected on how often he had overlooked the power of tiny habits, the creak of a gate, a gentle stretch, a mindful pause. Yet these little acts had quietly shaped his daily experience, supporting comfort and energy in ways he hadn't fully appreciated. By mid-morning, Daniel leaned on his rake and admired the neat rows of newly planted flowers. He felt satisfaction not from achievement, but from noticing, adjusting, and acting consistently with care. Gardening had always been a source of joy, but now it was also a gentle reminder that even small, intentional movements and mindful pauses could ripple outward, influencing both body and mind. The tiniest details often carry the greatest impact, he murmured, setting down his tools. The creak of the gate as he left the garden became a reassuring note, a reminder that awareness, patience, and small actions mattered more than speed or force. In the quiet of the morning, Daniel felt a renewed sense of hope. Through small, consistent habits, he could nurture comfort, energy, and vitality, one deliberate step at a time. Have you ever noticed how a simple sound or movement in your daily routine can prompt awareness and shift how your body feels for the rest of the day? The crunch of gravel beneath her sneakers sounded louder than usual as Margaret stepped onto the trail behind her house. "It's just one step," yet it feels like the beginning of everything," she whispered, taking in the early morning mist rising from the nearby trees. The air smelled faintly of pine and damp earth, and the soft hum of birdsong threaded through the quiet forest. Each step forward was deliberate, a gentle negotiation with her own awareness, as she felt her body awaken slowly to motion. Margaret had always loved walking, but now, as she noticed her stamina shift with age, each outing required attention. She felt the subtle stiffness in her knees, the mild tension in her lower back, and yet the trail offered her more than physical exercise, it offered perspective. The simple act of putting one foot in front of the other became a mindful ritual, connecting movement, breath, and awareness into a seamless whole. It reminded her that vitality wasn't measured by distance or speed, but by consistency, presence, and gentle engagement. She recalled a recent morning when she had taken only 10 minutes along this same trail. At first, she doubted it would make a difference. But by the end, she noticed that her mood lifted, her shoulders loosened, and a subtle warmth had spread through her legs. These weren't dramatic transformations, but they were proof that small, intentional actions, repeated daily, quietly shaped both comfort and energy. Margaret realized that walking wasn't just about physical health, it was a dialogue with her own body, each step a message of care and attentiveness. According to many studies, moderate walking in older adults supports circulation, joint health, and mood regulation. Imagine your body as a well-worn path. Small, consistent steps keep the soil firm, prevent erosion, and encourage new growth. One step at a time, repeated consistently, maintains resilience and vitality without overwhelming effort. Mindful pacing, brief stretches before and after, and attention to posture amplify the benefits, helping the body adapt gracefully to daily demands. Margaret adjusted her stride, noticing the gentle roll from heel to toe. She allowed her arms to swing naturally, breathing in the earthy scent of moss and leaves. Along the path, she paused to stretch her calves and rotate her shoulders, observing how her joints responded. These micro-adjustments were small but impactful, reinforcing comfort and energy as she continued. The trail didn't demand speed or distance, it demanded awareness, and Margaret discovered that giving herself permission to move deliberately was more valuable than racing toward any goal. Halfway through her walk, Margaret stopped to admire a cluster of wildflowers peeking through the ferns. Their resilience reminded her that life thrived not through haste, but through persistence and gentle care. She thought about her own habits, the few minutes she spent walking, the brief stretches at home, the mindful attention to posture, and realized these small, repeated gestures formed a foundation for ongoing well-being. Each step forward was a quiet investment in comfort, energy, and vitality, and the cumulative effect felt profound. By the time Margaret returned home, she felt lighter, steadier, and more present than when she had started. "It's amazing how one step can lead to another, and then another," she whispered, setting her walking shoes aside. The trail had offered more than movement, it had offered reassurance, empowerment, and a reminder that even the smallest, most consistent efforts mattered. Life, she reflected, wasn't about leaps or dramatic interventions. It was about noticing, adjusting, and honoring her own rhythms, one gentle step at a time. Have you ever noticed how taking just a few mindful steps outside can shift your energy, mood, and sense of presence for the rest of the day? The soft glow of the lamp bathed Eleanor's living room in a warm, golden light, stretching shadows across the walls like gentle fingers. She sank into her favorite armchair, blanket draped over her knees, and exhaled a long, quiet sigh. "There's something about evening light that slows time," she whispered, watching the glow shimmer against the polished wood of her coffee table. The world outside had dimmed to twilight, yet inside, the warmth and calm wrapped around her like a familiar hug. Eleanor had always appreciated these moments, the pause between the day's busyness and the night's rest. Recently, however, she had noticed how fatigue lingered longer, how her joints creaked more when she shifted, and how her mind sometimes raced with tasks left undone. Yet, in the gentle illumination of the lamp, she discovered a space to tune into her breathing, her posture, and the small sensations she often overlooked. The lamp's light became more than illumination. It became a quiet companion, reminding her to slow down and observe. She remembered a night the previous week when she had turned on the same lamp, brewed a cup of herbal tea, and simply noticed her body. She focused on the warmth in her hands, the rhythm of her breath, and the subtle stretch of her shoulders as she settled into the chair. That small ritual hadn't fixed her aches or erased fatigue, but it had created a sense of awareness and comfort that lingered into the next day. These tiny, deliberate actions, pausing, noticing, adjusting, formed the building blocks of well-being, often overlooked in the rush of daily life. According to many studies, creating calming evening routines supports sleep quality, relaxation, and gentle recovery in older adults. Think of your body as a slowly winding clock. Moments of stillness and awareness allow gears to settle, tension to release, and energy to redistribute evenly. Small habits, adjusting lighting, sitting mindfully, taking deep breaths, or sipping a warm drink, don't promise dramatic change, but they help maintain comfort, calm, and resilience over time. Eleanor reached for her tea and inhaled the subtle aroma, letting the warmth seep into her palms. She allowed her shoulders to relax, rolled them slowly, and stretched her neck gently, feeling how tiny movements could shift tension. She paired this with a short, deliberate breathing sequence. 3 long inhales through the nose, followed by slow, soft exhales through the mouth. These simple acts didn't take much time, but they gave her a profound sense of presence and care. She realized that the cumulative effect of small, consistent routines mattered more than any single action. As the evening deepened, Eleanor noticed how the soft lamplight highlighted details she often overlooked: the curve of a vase, the subtle reflection of her teacup, the pattern of the rug beneath her feet. Observing these small details mirrored the attention she was learning to give her own body and energy. Gentle awareness, mindful motion, and small rituals had quietly shaped her comfort, stamina, and sense of calm, teaching her that well-being wasn't about dramatic interventions, but about patience, observation, and consistency. She leaned back, sipping her tea slowly, and whispered to herself, "Even the smallest light can guide you home." The lamp's glow wasn't just illumination, it was a metaphor for small, deliberate acts of self-care. Each evening pause, each stretch, each mindful breath reminded her that attention to tiny moments could ripple outward, supporting both body and mind in ways that were profound yet gentle. It was a quiet empowerment, a steady reassurance that she could nurture herself without stress or pressure, one mindful gesture at a time. Have you ever noticed how a single moment of calm, like the soft glow of a lamp, can quietly restore your body and mind after a long day? The soft rustle of newspaper pages echoed through Henry's kitchen as he unfolded the morning edition. "It's funny how a simple sound can make the day feel alive," he murmured, glancing at the headlines but letting the routine moments capture his attention. Sunlight streamed in through the window, catching dust motes in a golden haze, and for a moment everything felt grounded and familiar. The aroma of coffee mingled with the crisp ink scent of paper, a combination that had always signaled the start of possibility and awareness. Henry had spent decades skimming headlines and sipping coffee in these quiet mornings, but recently he had become more attuned to how small habits influenced his body and mind. Lately, his wrists and fingers had felt stiffer than usual, and mornings sometimes began with a subtle heaviness in his shoulders. Yet, unfolding the paper slowly, flipping each page deliberately, and taking pauses to notice the aroma of his coffee had become a tiny ritual, one that nurtured both mindfulness and gentle movement. He remembered one morning when he spent an extra 5 minutes reading the lifestyle section while stretching his fingers and wrists. It wasn't a dramatic intervention, but by the end of the newspaper, he felt lighter in his hands and shoulders. That small, intentional attention reminded him that minor adjustments, when repeated consistently, could quietly support comfort and energy throughout the day. It was a gentle lesson in noticing the interplay between routine and well-being. According to many studies, small daily motions, even those as simple as page turning combined with mindful posture, can support joint mobility, circulation, and mental clarity in older adults. Think of your hands and arms as gears in a carefully constructed clock. If one moves gently and consistently, the others follow smoothly. Even micromovements, repeated every morning, help maintain comfort, flexibility, and overall vitality without adding strain or stress. Henry paused to stretch his fingers, interlacing them and rolling his wrists in slow, deliberate circles. He adjusted his chair, noticing the alignment of his back and shoulders, and took a deep breath that seemed to carry warmth and awareness through his chest. The newspaper in his hands became more than ink, and paper became a subtle tool for mindful engagement. Each fold, each turn, each moment of attention reinforced awareness of posture, muscle tension, and gentle movement. By the time he finished the section on home and garden, Henry felt a quiet sense of accomplishment and presence. He wasn't rushing or aiming for any physical milestone. He was simply noticing, adjusting, and moving with care. The routine, paired with mindful micro-movements, had shifted his comfort, mood, and alertness more than he would have guessed. It reminded him that small, deliberate actions, observed with attention, could ripple outward in ways that mattered more than any single grand gesture. Henry folded the newspaper carefully, setting it aside, and sipped the last of his coffee. Life often whispers through the smallest gestures, he said softly, letting the quiet morning fill him. The rustle of the pages, the warmth of the mug, the subtle stretches, they weren't dramatic, but they offered reassurance, empowerment, and a sense of control over his comfort and energy. Each tiny moment, repeated consistently, could quietly shape the quality of his day and foster a gentle, steady vitality. Have you ever noticed how small, mindful movements during ordinary routines can shift your comfort, focus, and energy for the whole morning? The soft tick of the wall clock filled the quiet dining room as Susan stirred her tea. It's funny how a simple tick can mark both the passage of time and the pause within it, she whispered, tracing the rim of her cup with her finger. The morning sun poured in through the window, brushing her cheeks with warmth and casting a golden glow over the table. Each tick seemed to echo with a gentle rhythm, reminding her that even ordinary moments held subtle opportunities for presence and awareness. Susan had always noticed small details in her surroundings, but lately she had begun to pay more attention to how her body responded to daily life. Her back ached slightly after long stretches of sitting, her wrists felt stiff from typing, and some mornings began with sluggishness that lingered longer than it used to. Yet the ritual of tea, paired with the quiet tick of the clock, created a brief moment of mindful awareness, an opportunity to tune into her posture, stretch unnoticed tension, and move gently without haste. She remembered a recent morning when she spent a few extra minutes seated at the table. While the clock ticked steadily, she rotated her shoulders, flexed her wrists, and lifted her chest with a subtle inhale. These micro-movements, coupled with mindful attention, left her feeling lighter, more alert, and surprisingly calm. She realized that such small, consistent practices didn't require dramatic effort, yet they had a profound effect on comfort, energy, and awareness over the course of the day. According to many studies, brief micro-movements and mindful pauses can help maintain joint mobility, circulation, and mental alertness in older adults. Picture your body like a pendulum. Gentle swings, regular resets, and intentional adjustments keep everything moving smoothly. Small, repeated actions, stretching while seated, rolling shoulders, or rotating wrists, don't promise instant change, but they foster long-term comfort and vitality, quietly supporting resilience and balance. Susan lifted her teacup slowly, noticing the warmth radiating into her palms. She let her shoulders relax, stretched her neck gently from side to side, and exhaled fully, feeling tension release from her upper back. The ticking of the clock became a metronome for small, deliberate movements, each beat a reminder to observe her body, adjust posture, and honor her own needs. The ritual was unremarkable to anyone else, yet for her, it became a quiet practice of empowerment and self-care. By the time she finished her tea, Susan felt a noticeable difference in her posture, focus, and mood. The aches that had been lingering weren't erased, but they felt lighter, more manageable, and easier to observe. She reflected on how often she had rushed through mornings, ignoring the subtle cues of her body. Now, she recognized that small, mindful actions, repeated consistently, like pausing with tea, moving gently, and tuning into the rhythm of life, were building blocks for comfort, energy, and presence. Susan set the empty cup on the saucer, glancing once more at the softly ticking clock. Even the smallest rhythms can guide us toward balance, she whispered, feeling a quiet sense of hope. The simple act of observing, adjusting, and engaging intentionally reminded her that well-being was not about dramatic change, but about consistent, gentle care. Each tick of the clock became a subtle invitation to nurture her body, mind, and spirit, one mindful moment at a time. Have you ever noticed how paying attention to small, rhythmic cues in your daily routine can quietly shift your comfort, focus, and energy? The first drop of rain tapped lightly against David's window, a quiet punctuation in the otherwise still afternoon. I never realized how much one drop could capture my attention, he whispered, leaning forward to watch the ripple form on the glass. The sky was soft, gray, and the faint smell of wet earth drifted inside, mingling with the aroma of his afternoon tea. Each drop seemed to slow time, calling him to pause and notice the small details of life he often overlooked. David had always enjoyed watching the rain, but recently he had become more conscious of how subtle shifts in his body mirrored the weather outside. A tightness in his shoulders after hours at his desk, a stiffness in his knees while walking to the mailbox, these small signs reminded him that gentle care mattered more than ever. The rain, falling softly yet persistently, became a quiet metaphor. Small, repeated actions, like tiny drops, could create a gentle, cumulative effect on well-being over time. He remembered a recent rainy afternoon when he took a few moments to stretch while watching the water slide down the glass. He rotated his shoulders, flexed his fingers, and leaned gently side to side. The movements were minimal but deliberate, paired with a few mindful breaths. By the end of that short practice, he felt lighter, calmer, and more connected to his own body. That simple habit, just a few minutes of attentive motion during an ordinary day, reminded him that small, consistent gestures mattered more than occasional grand efforts. According to many studies, brief periods of mindful stretching and gentle movement can support circulation, joint comfort, and mood regulation in older adults. Think of your body like a garden absorbing rain. Even a few drops distributed steadily nourish the soil, roots, and flowers over time. Tiny, repeated actions, flexing joints, adjusting posture, breathing, intentionally help maintain comfort, energy, and resilience, quietly supporting the body's natural rhythm. David lifted his cup of tea, noticing the warmth in his hands and the soft steam curling upward. He let his shoulders release, rolled his wrists slowly, and gently bent forward and back, feeling tension ease from his spine. Watching the rain, he realized that these small movements, when paired with attention and presence, offered more than physical relief. They created a moment of mindful engagement, a reminder that care and awareness were within his reach every day. As the rain continued to fall, David moved through a few simple actions, stretching his neck and shoulders, rotating his ankles while seated, and letting his arms swing lightly as he walked from window to chair. Each micro-movement was minor on its own, but together they fostered comfort, energy, and a sense of calm that carried him through the afternoon. He recognized that even ordinary routines, approached with mindfulness and care, could quietly transform daily experience. By the time the rain slowed, David felt a renewed sense of presence. The soft patter on the window, the warmth of his tea, and the gentle stretches had created a small sanctuary within the day. He realized that well-being wasn't about major interventions or perfection. It was about noticing, adjusting, and taking small, consistent actions that honored both body and mind. "I suppose life is a bit like rain," he whispered, watching the last drops trickle down the pane. Slow, gentle, and persistent, shaping everything quietly. The lesson was simple. Small, deliberate habits, repeated with attention, could ripple outward, supporting comfort, energy, and calm, one mindful moment at a time. Have you ever noticed how a tiny detail, like a single raindrop, can prompt you to pause and take care of yourself in ways that last all day? The wind carried the faint scent of jasmine as Laura stepped onto her front porch, stretching her arms wide to welcome the morning. "There's something about open air that feels like it's whispering just to you," she murmured, letting the sun touch her cheeks and the soft wooden planks warm beneath her feet. Birds chirped insistently from the maple tree, and a neighbor's dog barked playfully in the distance. The porch was her threshold between indoors and outdoors, between quiet reflection and the unfolding day, a space where small rituals could hold profound significance. Laura had always loved mornings on the porch, but now, in her late 60s, she noticed how subtle aches and stiffness crept into her body with daily life. Standing up from a chair could sometimes feel heavier than before. Bending to water plants required a moment of preparation, and she found herself taking small pauses while walking down steps that had once been effortless. Yet the porch, bathed in sunlight and fresh air, offered her an opportunity to engage gently with her body, to notice small sensations, and to reclaim agency over comfort and energy. She recalled a few weeks earlier when she had decided to spend 10 extra minutes on the porch, stretching lightly before tending her potted plants. Leaning over the railing, she rolled her shoulders slowly, rotated her wrists, and let her neck unwind with deliberate turns. The movements were small, almost imperceptible to anyone watching, but she felt a subtle release of tension, a lightness in her arms, and a calming shift in her mind. That moment reminded her that well-being often grows not from major interventions, but from mindful, repeated, gentle attention to her own body. According to many studies, gentle stretching, posture awareness, and brief outdoor exposure can help maintain joint flexibility, circulation, and mood in older adults. Imagine the body as a wooden porch itself. Every board, every beam, and every nail benefits from regular, gentle attention. Even small gestures, stretching, leaning, bending, and mindful breathing reinforce structural integrity, supporting resilience and comfort over time. Like the porch, the body responds not to sudden force, but to steady, thoughtful care. Laura took a deep breath, feeling the cool breeze fill her lungs, and lifted her arms overhead slowly. She let them fall gently to her sides, rolled her shoulders backward, and then leaned slightly forward to engage her core. The warm morning sun pressed softly against her back, and she felt the subtle awakening of muscles that had lain dormant through the night. She moved from side to side, bending lightly at the waist, noticing how each action shifted tension and released energy. The process was deliberate, measured, and deeply satisfying. She picked up a small watering can next to a row of potted plants along the railing. Rather than rushing through the task, she paused, inhaling the earthy scent of soil and the faint fragrance of blooms. Each watering motion became an opportunity to engage her arms, shoulders, and back with care, paying attention to alignment and comfort. The ritual was simple, but within its simplicity lay a rhythm, a gentle flow that brought both movement and mindfulness together. As she finished tending her plants, Laura leaned against the railing, feeling the sun's warmth settle into her skin. She realized that even ordinary chores, approached with mindfulness and intention, could become a form of self-care. Small adjustments like rotating wrists while lifting a can, bending knees slightly when lowering a pot, or pausing to take a breath added up over the day, supporting comfort, energy, and presence. The porch, the air, and the rhythm of morning had combined to create a quiet sanctuary for her body and mind. A few minutes later, her neighbor, Mr. Thompson, walked by with his newspaper tucked under his arm. They exchanged a cheerful wave, and she smiled at the simplicity of connection. The brief interaction reminded her that well-being wasn't just physical, it was relational, too. Observing, breathing, moving gently, and taking note of the small interactions of life all contributed to a deeper sense of vitality. The porch had become a stage for these small yet meaningful engagements, a place where body, mind, and community intersected seamlessly. Laura sank into her chair, letting her body settle completely. She noticed how the small stretches and mindful motions had shifted tension in her shoulders, lightened the stiffness in her lower back, and even seemed to sharpen her focus. The morning light glimmered off the railing, casting intricate shadows that danced across the wooden planks. For a moment, she simply observed the interplay of light, shadow, scent, air, and movement, and felt a profound gratitude for the seemingly minor moments that collectively supported her well-being. She whispered softly to herself, "Even small steps, small stretches, and small pauses add up to something bigger." The porch wasn't just a place to breathe or water plants, it was a daily ritual, a sanctuary of small, deliberate actions that shaped comfort, energy, and mindfulness in ways both subtle and powerful. Each morning spent here became an affirmation that gentle, consistent care mattered, and that her body, like the porch, could be nurtured and supported with patient attention. The wind rustled the leaves overhead, a reminder that life continued to move forward, whether she rushed or paused. Laura smiled, feeling a quiet sense of empowerment and hope. She didn't need dramatic interventions to feel alive, present, and comfortable. Instead, she needed awareness, intention, and gentle consistency. The open porch, the warm sun, and the mindful movements had reminded her that vitality was built in small, intentional moments. Have you ever noticed how taking a few mindful moments outdoors can shift your energy, release tension, and create a sense of calm that lasts throughout the day? The first log popped softly in the fireplace, sending a tiny spark dancing across the hearth. "I never thought a small crackle could feel so alive," Martha whispered, sinking into her armchair and letting the warmth envelope her. The room smelled faintly of cedar and ash, a comforting aroma that mingled with the rich scent of her evening tea. Outside, the wind whispered through the bare branches of winter trees, but inside, the soft glow of the flames created a cocoon of calm. Each crackle, each flicker, felt like a heartbeat, a rhythm connecting her to the present moment, to her body, and to the comfort of simple awareness. Martha had always loved sitting by the fireplace, especially on evenings when the world felt particularly fast or heavy. Lately, however, she had become more conscious of the ways age subtly reshaped her body. Her lower back stiffened after long days, her wrists tensed after writing letters or knitting, and even brief moments of bending or reaching required careful attention. Yet, in this quiet ritual of firelight, warmth, and mindful breathing, she discovered how small, deliberate movements could make a significant difference in comfort, energy, and presence. She recalled a recent evening when she took 5 minutes before settling fully into the chair to stretch alongside the fire. She extended her arms overhead slowly, rolled her shoulders in gentle circles, and twisted her torso just enough to feel tension ease. Each movement was small, measured, almost ceremonial. But as the fire crackled, she noticed a lightness in her back, a soft warmth in her shoulders, and a calm clarity that hadn't been there before. The fire wasn't merely a source of heat. It was a gentle companion, encouraging her to notice, adjust, and honor her own body's signals. According to many studies, brief, mindful stretching and attention to posture can support flexibility, joint comfort, and circulation in older adults. Think of your body like a fireplace. It needs gentle care, attention to detail, and a steady rhythm to provide warmth effectively. Even small, repeated actions, stretching arms, rotating shoulders, engaging the core, maintain structural integrity, reduce stiffness, and support overall vitality. Just as logs crackle and shift to keep the fire burning steadily, gentle, deliberate movement keeps the body functioning smoothly. Martha picked up her knitting, holding it loosely in her hands. Rather than rushing through a few rows, she paused between stitches to rotate her wrists, flex her fingers, and stretch her shoulders lightly. She noticed how this small attention to movement changed the experience entirely. Tension eased, focus sharpened, and the act of knitting became a form of self-care rather than a chore. Each stitch, each twist of yarn, became an opportunity to align her body, observe subtle sensations, and foster awareness. As the evening progressed, Martha moved through a short series of gentle actions, stretching her neck slowly, rolling her ankles beneath the chair, and letting her spine lengthen with each inhale and exhale. The warmth of the fire seeped into her muscles, softening stiffness and encouraging relaxation. She realized that these small, consistent habits, paired with mindful awareness, could ripple through the rest of her evening, improving comfort, mood, and energy in ways she had not fully appreciated. The flickering light danced across the walls, casting shadows that seemed to sway in harmony with her own gentle motions. Martha reflected on how often she had overlooked the value of micro-moments. Just a few minutes, spent moving thoughtfully, observing her body, and breathing deeply. These seemingly minor actions accumulated over time, much like the steady logs in the hearth building a slow, sustaining fire. She understood that well-being wasn't a product of grand gestures, but a collection of small, deliberate choices repeated with care and attention. She poured a cup of herbal tea, the steam curling into the firelight, and lifted it to her lips. Each sip became a mindful act, a meditation on warmth, taste, and presence. She noticed the subtle relaxation in her shoulders, the softening of her jaw, and the slow settling of her spine into the chair. The fire crackled again, sending a faint pop that echoed through the room, reminding her that life, like the flame, is composed of small, vibrant moments, moments that, when observed and honored, nurture both body and mind. Martha thought about her earlier day, the few steps she had taken outside, the gentle stretches she had done in the morning, the attention she had paid to posture during household tasks. These were not monumental achievements, but each tiny gesture had contributed to the ease she now felt. The firelight seemed to magnify the realization. Consistency in small, deliberate habits was more powerful than occasional bursts of activity or effort. Well-being, she understood, was not a destination, but a daily practice. quietly maintained through attention, care, and presence. She leaned back, letting the warmth settle deep into her core, and whispered, "Even small moments, attended to with care, can light up an entire evening." The crackling fire, the subtle stretches, the mindful sipping of tea, all of it reinforced a profound lesson. Vitality and comfort are cultivated, not commanded, through patience, awareness, and gentle, repeated action. Each evening spent in these rituals was a gift, an investment in physical and mental well-being, and a reminder that small acts, consistently performed, could ripple outward into energy, focus, and calm that lasted well beyond the moment. Outside, the wind continued to whisper through the bare trees, but inside, the fire's warmth and the deliberate movements of her body created a quiet, steady sanctuary. Martha smiled softly, feeling empowered and grateful. She did not need dramatic interventions or intense routines to feel alive and comfortable. She needed only presence, awareness, and the gentle, repeated actions that nurtured her body and mind. The crackle of the fire was not just a sound, it was a metaphor, a rhythm, and a companion, reminding her that small, consistent efforts illuminate life in profound ways. Have you ever noticed how a simple moment, like sitting by a crackling fire, can inspire gentle awareness and small actions that quietly shift your comfort, energy, and presence for the rest of the day? The warm, yeasty scent of fresh-baked bread drifted through the small kitchen, curling around Marjorie like a gentle embrace. "There's something about bread that feels like home," she whispered, closing her eyes and letting the aroma fill her senses. Outside, the morning sun streamed through the window, casting a honeyed glow on the counter where the golden loaf rested, its crust crisp and fragrant. The simple act of baking had become a sanctuary for her, a place where movement, mindfulness, and creativity intertwined seamlessly. Marjorie had always loved baking, but now, in her 70s, she noticed how her body had started reminding her of age in subtle ways. Kneading dough required attention to wrist and shoulder alignment, standing for long stretches invited stiffness in her back and knees, and even bending to reach the lower oven shelf demanded care. Yet these challenges, instead of discouraging her, became invitations to cultivate awareness, patience, and gentle care. The kitchen, warm with sunlight and the scent of bread, became a classroom where she learned to honor her body while nurturing herself. She remembered the first time she tried a new sourdough recipe. The dough was sticky, pliable, and alive, responding to her touch. As she folded it carefully, she noticed a subtle tension release from her wrists and shoulders. Kneading, stretching, and folding, the dough was, in itself, a form of mindful exercise. Tiny, intentional movements that supported flexibility, strength, and coordination. By the time she shaped the loaf and set it into the oven, Marjorie felt an ease she hadn't anticipated. The body's stiffness had softened, her mood had lifted, and a quiet pride had settled in her chest. According to many studies, light, purposeful movement combined with mindful attention can improve joint comfort, circulation, and mental clarity in older adults. Picture your body as dough. If treated with care, stretched gently, and moved deliberately, it becomes more flexible and resilient over time. Even small, repeated actions like wrist rotations, gentle kneading, or standing with awareness during baking create ripples of comfort, energy, and presence that last well beyond the task itself. Marjorie lifted the dough to the counter, turning it slowly, pressing lightly with her palms. She noticed how each movement required her to engage her core, stabilize her legs, and breathe in rhythm with her hands. The dough responded to her touch, yielding and resisting in perfect balance. Each fold was an opportunity to observe her body, adjust posture, and release tension. She realized that mindfulness didn't require meditation cushions or quiet rooms. It could be woven into ordinary tasks: baking bread, stirring soup, watering plants, or folding laundry. As the oven timer ticked down, Marjorie washed her hands slowly, feeling warmth spread through her fingers and wrists. She allowed herself to linger on each motion, stretching her shoulders lightly, flexing her toes, and breathing in the kitchen's fragrant air. By intentionally slowing down, she noticed subtle shifts she might have otherwise overlooked. The soft tension in her neck releasing, her shoulders dropping slightly, and a gentle warmth spreading from her hands to her arms. Small, deliberate attention to movement and posture transformed a simple morning task into a full-body experience of presence and care. When the bread finally emerged, golden and steaming, she placed it on the cooling rack and inhaled deeply, letting the aroma settle into her memory. Each crackling crust, each warm loaf, was a reminder that small, consistent efforts, folding dough, mindful posture, gentle stretching, added up to tangible, lasting benefits. The process itself became a metaphor. Just as the bread required patience, attention, and repeated folds to rise perfectly, her body and mind responded to steady, thoughtful care over time. Marjorie sliced the loaf slowly, appreciating the soft interior and crisp crust. She noticed the satisfaction in her movements, the gentle resistance of the knife through the bread, the rhythm of her hands guiding each slice, the subtle engagement of her core as she leaned forward. Every motion was deliberate, every breath measured, and every sensory detail, the warmth, the scent, the sound of crust cracking, deepened her connection to the present moment. The act of baking had become a gentle exercise in awareness, supporting flexibility, comfort, and energy simultaneously. She set a slice on a plate, spreading a little butter as it melted into the warm surface. Sitting by the window, she took her first bite, savoring the flavors, the textures, and the quiet morning light. In that moment, she reflected on how ordinary tasks, when approached with intention, could transform both body and mind. Small movements, small attentions, and small rituals created profound effects over time. Baking bread was no longer just about food, it was a practice of patience, awareness, and self-compassion. Marjorie watched sunlight glint on the steam rising from the loaf and thought of her friends, many of whom struggled to find time or patience for gentle self-care. She realized that the key was not discipline or perfection, but observation, intention, and repetition. Each small habit, knee bends while lifting dough, wrist rotations while folding, mindful breaths between steps, was a tiny act of empowerment. Like the rising loaf, her energy and comfort could grow steadily, quietly, and resiliently when nurtured with care. As she finished her slice of bread, Marjorie whispered, "Even the smallest gestures, repeated with awareness, rise into something nourishing." The morning light, the warmth of the kitchen, and the deliberate movements of her body had created a rhythm of care, comfort, and presence. She felt empowered, calm, and full not just from the food, but from the conscious attention she had given to each step of the process. The scent of bread, the feel of dough, and the awareness of movement had quietly reinforced her sense of vitality, reminding her that well-being grows in the small, deliberate moments of everyday life. Have you ever noticed how focusing on the simple, ordinary tasks like baking, cooking, or cleaning can become a quiet practice of care that nourishes both body and mind? The crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves, earthy and slightly sweet, as Richard stepped onto the gravel path in his backyard. "It's almost like the trees are whispering their secrets to me," he murmured, pausing to watch a single leaf swirl lazily to the ground. The sun was low, casting long amber shadows across the yard, and the gentle wind rustled the remaining leaves in the maple and oak trees. Each sound, each movement, felt alive, a quiet invitation to notice the world and, in turn, his own body. Richard had always enjoyed walks in the fall, but in recent years he had become increasingly aware of the subtle shifts in his body. A twinge in his lower back after bending to tie his shoes, stiffness in his knees while stepping over uneven gravel, or tension creeping into his shoulders after hours at his desk all reminded him that he needed gentle, deliberate care. Yet, rather than discouraging him, these reminders had become lessons. The autumn walk was not just for scenery, it was an opportunity to cultivate presence, awareness, and mindful movement. Earlier that morning, he had decided to spend 20 minutes outdoors raking leaves along the edge of the yard. Instead of rushing through the chore, he approached it as a mindful practice. Each sweep of the rake engaged his arms, shoulders, and core, while each bend and stretch to pick up leaves incorporated slow, deliberate movement into his routine. The rhythm of raking, paired with the sound of leaves crunching underfoot and the crisp air filling his lungs, transformed a simple task into a holistic experience for body and mind. According to many studies, Combining light physical activity with mindfulness like walking, gentle stretching, or raking can support joint mobility, circulation, and emotional well-being in older adults. Imagine the body as a forest floor. Consistent care, attention to small movements, and awareness of the environment nourish the system over time. Tiny adjustments, bending with knees instead of back, rotating wrists while raking, or pacing with awareness accumulate into significant benefits, improving comfort, energy, and resilience with consistency. Richard paused mid-sweep, noticing how the tension in his lower back eased as he inhaled deeply, drawing in the crisp autumn air. He rotated his shoulders slowly, flexed his fingers around the rake handle, and bent slightly at the knees to gather a small pile of leaves. The repetitive, deliberate motions not only moved his body but also synchronized with the rustle of the leaves and the whisper of the wind. Each sound, each movement, became part of a gentle rhythm, a meditative cadence that grounded him in the present moment. As he continued, he reflected on how small, mindful actions in daily routines could ripple outward into broader patterns of well-being. By bending carefully to pick up leaves, pausing to rotate his shoulders, or walking deliberately along the gravel path, he engaged muscles that might otherwise remain stiff. These micro-adjustments, repeated consistently, created subtle yet meaningful shifts in comfort, energy, and mood. The act of caring for the yard became inseparable from caring for his own body, an interplay of movement, awareness, and intention that left him feeling centered and alive. A particularly vibrant maple leaf floated down, landing near his boot. Richard bent with his knees, flexed gently, and picked it up, marveling at the color and texture. He realized that moments like these, small, intentional, and mindful, held more than aesthetic pleasure. They reminded him that awareness of the body, attention to movement, and gentle care could transform ordinary experiences into acts of nourishment. Each leaf, each bend, each breath was a subtle lesson. Well-being is not built in dramatic episodes, but in patient, consistent attention to small, meaningful moments. As he raked, he allowed his gaze to wander across the yard, noticing the interplay of colors, textures, and shadows. The golds and oranges of fallen leaves, the dark bark of trees, and the crisp blue of the sky above created a sensory tapestry that invited him to breathe, stretch, and move in harmony with the environment. The simple act of observation, paired with deliberate motion, reinforced the connection between mind and body, grounding him in the richness of the present. By the time he finished gathering several piles of leaves, Richard felt a noticeable difference in his body. The stiffness that had lingered in his lower back was lighter, his shoulders were more relaxed, and his mind carried a calm clarity that seemed to echo the quiet rhythm of falling leaves. He realized that well-being was not about rushing through life or striving for dramatic results, but about cultivating awareness, engaging in gentle, consistent movement, and honoring the body's natural rhythms. He set the rake aside and walked slowly along the path, inhaling the earthy scent of leaves and listening to the soft crackle beneath his shoes. Each step was deliberate, rolling through the heels, flexing the ankles, and aligning the spine. The air was cool, crisp, and invigorating, filling his lungs with a gentle wakefulness. For Richard, the autumn walk had become more than a chore or a moment of scenery. It was a ritual of mindful presence, a bridge between small movements and lasting comfort, energy, and emotional balance. Sitting briefly on a bench near the garden, he closed his eyes and let the wind play across his face. The rustling leaves became a meditative soundtrack, guiding his awareness from the soles of his feet, up through his legs, and into his shoulders and neck. Every small movement, every micro-adjustment in posture, was amplified by mindfulness, creating a sense of vitality that seemed to settle deep into his bones. Richard smiled softly, recognizing that this simple practice, a blend of sensory attention, deliberate movement, and connection with nature, was cultivating resilience and comfort in ways subtle yet profound. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the yard, Richard felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. The leaves were gathered, the air was crisp and alive, and his body felt renewed in a gentle, satisfying way. He reflected on how small, intentional actions, repeated with awareness, had created this moment of comfort and presence. The rustle of leaves, the bend of his knees, the rotation of his shoulders, and the mindful breathing had all woven together into a tapestry of well-being, one that could be carried forward, moment by moment, Day by day, Richard whispered to himself, even the smallest, mindful actions, repeated consistently, can move us toward comfort and presence in ways we often overlook. The yard, the leaves, and his own body had become partners in a quiet, steady ritual of care. He realized that vitality is cultivated in these small, attentive gestures, not in dramatic interventions or fleeting bursts of effort, just as each leaf contributed to the carpet beneath his feet. Each thoughtful movement contributed to his body's balance, energy, and calm. Have you ever noticed how the simple, rhythmic acts, bending, stretching, walking, or observing, can ripple through your day, quietly enhancing comfort, energy, and presence? The horizon blazed in gold and amber, painting the sky in colors so vivid they seemed almost unreal. Anna stood barefoot on the hill behind her home, letting the warm breeze brush her cheeks and tousle her hair. "It feels like the world is holding its breath just for me," she whispered, closing her eyes to absorb the last warmth of the day. The scent of grass, wildflowers, and distant pine mingled in the air, and the soft hum of cicadas in the nearby meadow added a gentle rhythm to the evening. In this moment, Anna felt simultaneously small and infinite, her body tuned to the delicate harmony of the world around her. Lately, Anna had been more aware of her body than ever. The subtle stiffness in her knees when walking uphill, the occasional tightness in her shoulders after long hours of reading, and the slow fatigue in her legs during evening chores reminded her that age demanded gentler attention and mindfulness. She had tried rushing through tasks or ignoring minor discomforts in the past, but now she had begun to see that wellness was cultivated not through force, but through conscious, steady, intentional practice. The golden light of sunset became her signal, a daily reminder to pause, observe, and care for herself with awareness. Earlier that afternoon, she had taken a slow walk around the neighborhood, paying attention to every step, each inhalation, and the way her body shifted with terrain. Each ankle rotation, gentle bend at the knees, and subtle lengthening of the spine added to a rhythm that was as much about movement as it was about awareness. By the time she reached the hill, Anna felt lighter, not just in her body but in her mind, a clear, calm space created by deliberate action and observation. The golden hour amplified the effects, bathing her in warmth that seemed to seep into muscles, bones, and spirit alike. According to many studies, mindful movement, postural awareness, and slow, repeated gestures can enhance joint comfort, circulation, and mental clarity for older adults. Imagine the body as a landscape. Each careful step, each deliberate bend, and each small stretch nurtures the terrain, making it resilient, responsive, and alive. Like the hills and meadows under the golden light, the body thrives under consistent attention, gentle movement, and patient observation. Even tiny, mindful actions, turning the wrists, flexing the ankles, rolling the shoulders, can accumulate into profound shifts in comfort, energy, and presence over time. Anna let herself sink slowly into the grass, letting her spine lengthen naturally and her shoulders soften. She flexed her ankles lightly, rotated her wrists, and inhaled deeply, feeling the rhythm of her breath align with the gentle whisper of the wind. Each small motion, paired with sensory awareness, the warmth of the sun, the scent of the meadow, the soft hum of insects, reinforced a profound lesson she had been learning over years. Vitality is nurtured through steady, deliberate attention, not dramatic bursts of effort. She thought back to the mornings spent stretching on her front porch, the evenings by the fireplace, the hours kneading dough, and the autumn walks gathering leaves. All these moments, seemingly small and separate, had woven together into a tapestry of mindful practice and gentle care. Each micro-movement, each pause to observe, each small ritual had contributed to the steady cultivation of comfort, energy, and presence. The sunset, with its warm, expansive light, was a final reflection of these cumulative effects, a visual metaphor for the glow that consistent, mindful care could create in life. Anna allowed her arms to rise overhead slowly, reaching toward the sky as though she could touch the fading light. She arched gently, stretched her sides, and twisted lightly to each direction, feeling tension release from her lower back and shoulders. The process was unhurried, deliberate, and full of awareness. Each movement reminded her that she could create space for comfort and vitality in every moment, simply by observing, adjusting, and moving thoughtfully. She realized that she was not just stretching her body, she was expanding her experience of life itself, letting awareness and care illuminate each moment. As the sun dipped lower, Anna rolled onto her side, and then back up to sit cross-legged, letting her spine align naturally and her gaze soften. She flexed her fingers, rotated her wrists, and extended her legs with gentle control. The body, she noted, responded beautifully to intention. Stiffness faded, circulation improved, and a sense of calm focus emerged. She marveled at how small, consistent habits had gradually reshaped her experience of her own body, creating a deep-seated comfort and energy she had once thought only possible through strenuous effort or extreme routines. The distant hills glowed, tinged with pink and violet shadows. Anna breathed in rhythm with the fading light, and a quiet gratitude filled her chest. She reflected on the small choices that had brought her here, a few minutes of stretching on the porch, mindful engagement with household chores, walks through the neighborhood, gentle kitchen tasks, and attentive observation of her body's responses. Each action, though minor in isolation, accumulated into a profound shift in how she experienced her body, her energy, and her sense of presence in the world. She noticed a squirrel darting across the hill, pausing to nibble on an acorn, and a flock of birds circling in the distance. These small details reminded her that life's richness often emerges in the quiet, ordinary moments, moments that, when attended to with awareness, could ripple outward, enhancing comfort, energy, and joy. Even a brief pause to observe movement, texture, sound, or scent could transform the ordinary into a practice of vitality. Anna rose slowly, allowing the evening light to wash over her fully. She walked a few deliberate steps down the hill, noticing the gentle flex of her ankles, the engagement of her core, and the natural swing of her arms. Each step reinforced a sense of grounded presence, a connection between body, mind, and environment. The golden light bathed her in warmth, highlighting the continuity between small, repeated gestures of care and the sustained sense of well-being she now carried. As she returned home, Anna felt a quiet empowerment. The journey of cultivating comfort and energy had not been a single dramatic event, but a series of small, mindful choices repeated over time. Each movement, each breath, and each observation of her body had contributed to a cumulative effect, creating resilience, calm, and vitality. The sunset was a mirror, reflecting the glow that comes from steady, intentional care. The internal light, generated by attention, presence, and gentle movement. Sitting by the window later, watching the final slivers of golden light fade, Anna whispered softly, "Even the smallest gestures, repeated with care, illuminate life in ways that last far beyond the moment." She smiled, realizing that wellness, comfort, and energy were not distant goals but ongoing practices, woven seamlessly into the tapestry of everyday life. Her body, mind, and spirit had become attuned to the rhythms of attention, presence, and deliberate movement, and she carried that awareness into every task, every walk, every breath. The horizon now glimmered with the last vestiges of amber and rose, the day giving way to quiet twilight. Anna felt a sense of completion, of full-circle understanding. The porch stretches, the fireplace crackle, the baking, the autumn walks, and now the golden hilltop, all had been chapters in a lived experience of mindful, consistent care. Each ritual, each small, deliberate action had contributed to a deeper, more sustained vitality. She understood that well-being is built gradually, like the slow setting of the sun, its warmth and color expanding outward quietly but powerfully. Have you ever noticed how consistent, mindful actions, whether stretching, walking, observing, or simply pausing, can accumulate over time, creating a quiet, enduring sense of comfort, energy, and presence in your life?